Shalom, this is Jay Shear. I'm sharing what I know. This is the part two to the color of the Messiah and its importance. It's very important that we understand the color of the Messiah because whatever color he is, that's the color of the Jews. And it's very important to understand who he is, even though people say it's not important to understand his color, but if it's in the Bible, if it actually tells us the color, it's very important because Yah wants us to understand the color of his only begotten son. And with his color, it also shows you how the redemption of Judah and those people will be redeemed in the last days. So we really need to understand. And in part one, we talked about his lineage because we want to use the Bible. And the Bible basically shows us his color if we just know where to look. It's very obvious as we go through part one when we talked about Judah and how he married two Hamitic, African, Canaanite, black women, and well, had children by him. He married the daughter of Shua, who was a Canaanite, and he had a child by Tamar, his daughter-in-law. When he was supposed to give one of his sons, she tricked him. So look at part one for that information, but here we are in part two. I'm going to show you even more evidence of his nationalities, his ethnicity, his race. We know he was a nation of Israel from his father's side, but we also have to look at the descendants of his maternal lineage as well, not only from his mom, but even from his father's mother and so forth. So it's going to be very important to see that. So let us begin. So here we are with Rahab. And Rahab, as we know, many of us know the story, how she was in the land of Canaan. And when Joshua came in to take over the promised land, and she was the harlot there. So let us read through the story and give some important reference to some of the things that we're going to see here. In Joshua chapter 2, verse 1, it reads, Then Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men as spies secretly from Shittim, saying, Go view the land, especially Jericho. So they went and came into the house of a harlot, whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. It's very important to see how she was an harlot, right? So even in the first part one, we talked about Tamar, and how she posed as a prostitute, and how she tricked her father-in-law Judah to sleep with her, to impregnate her, and because he didn't do what was right and give her the youngest son that he had after the first 2 sons died. But you know, if you need to see that, go to part 1. But here we see that Rahab was a harlot. She was actually a harlot, not just even posing as one. And it just shows you how even through our sins that Yah wants to redeem us if we truly trust in him, and how he redeemed, and we will see how he redeemed all of us through Yahusha, the Messiah. So verse 2, it says, It was told that the king of Jericho, saying, Behold, men from the sons of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land. And the king of Jericho sent word of Rahab, saying, Bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them, and she said, Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. It came about when it was time to shut the gate at dark that the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them in the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued them on the road to the Jordan to the fords. And as soon as those who were pursuing them had gone out, they shut the gate. Now, before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof. All right. And said to the men, I know that Yahuwah has given you the land, and that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before you. So she even said right there, she gave credit to knowing, acknowledging Yah, and know that he had actually given them the land of Canaan. So it's very interesting to see how even before they came, they already heard word, and she already acknowledged Yah as a very powerful God. So verse 10, it says, "For we have heard how Yahuwah dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. When we heard it, our hearts melted, and no courage remained in any man any longer because of you. For Yahuwah your God, He is God, in heaven above and on earth beneath. Now therefore, please swear to me by Yahuwah, since I have dealt kindly with you, that you also deal kindly with my father's household, and give a pledge of truth, and spare my father, and my mother, and my brothers, and my sisters, with all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death." So right there, she didn't just ask for her own life. She also asked for her father's life, her mother's, her brothers, and her sisters, which is very important as we go later on in the text. So the men said to her, "Our life for yours, if you do not tell this business of ours. And it shall come about when Yahuwah give us the land, that we will deal kindly and faithful with you." The promise of Rahab. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall, so that she was living on the wall. She said to them, "Go to the hill country, so that the pursuers will not happen upon you, and hide yourself there for 3 days, until the pursuers return. Then afterwards you may go on." Starting at verse 17, the men said to her, "We shall be free from this oath to you, which you have made us swear, unless, when we come into the land, you tie this cord of scarlet thread in the window through which you let us down, and gather to yourself into the house your father and your mother and your brothers, and all your father's household. It shall come about that anyone who goes out of the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we shall be free. But anyone who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head, if a hand is laid on him. But if you tell this business of ours, then we shall be free from the oath which you have made us swear." She said, "According to your words, so be it." So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. So it's very important to see how, just like when they just coming out of Egypt, when they put the blood on the door, if they left out of the house, they would actually receive the death angel. But here, in the same sense, that if they leave out the door that that they had warned them about, then the blood was no longer on their hands, but on their own head. So that's very interesting. But then in Joshua 22, it says, "They departed and came to the hill country and remained there for 3 days until the pursuers returned. Now the pursuers had sought them all along the road, but had not found them. Then the two men returned and came down from the hill country and crossed over and came to Joshua the son of Nun, and they related to him all that had happened. They said to Joshua, surely Yahuwah has given all the land into our hands. Moreover, all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before us. So it's very important to see how they were confident now, and that all the land of the Canaanites was given into their hands. So this is a Canaanite city right here in Jericho. So it's very important to understand how that was a Canaanite city that Rahab was living in. And as we see, the land of Canaanites, right? We talked about this before. Ham, Africa, or Cam, like Kemetic, how he basically came out. It says, came out of Noah, and the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark with Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan. So she definitely is a black Canaanite woman, and this is a black Canaanite place. And if we look at archaeology as well, Canaan's sons, the Canaanites, you know, the son of Ham was Canaan. He actually was the one that was cursed by his grandfather Noah, which are the Canaanites. And it's the land of Canaan. It's also called the Levant. And in future, it will be called Israel. So we see even in the map there on the left, it says Canaan, tribal territories of Israel. So we know that Israel came in and they took over these places. Down in the bottom left corner, you see the different pictures of archaeology of the people. The first one was kind of bleached. They did bleach certain pictures, so you can tell, you know, the color there is kind of bleached off, but you can see the facial features there. The one in the middle, you can see the facial features there, surely a black looking man. And the third one, most definitely, is a black looking man. And they say that you can tell, if you notice, that the little bandana thing on his head, on their heads, you can tell that was a Canaanite, from what my understanding and what I've seen in some of my research. I don't think I'm always right, but that's what I at least can tell, because even in the top right, you can see the man there with a bandana and his child and his wife. And if you read the little writing at the bottom, it says Egyptian memorial stone of a mercenary Levantan soldier drinking beer in the company of his Egyptian wife and child. 18th dynasty, 1350 BC, close up. So right here, the Egyptian and the Canaanites. Egyptian was Mizraim, and they all had the same ancestry as Ham. So you can see how they even intermix it among each other, but you can see what a Canaanite looked like. So, you know, if you watch any movies and they don't show the Canaanite this way, you know something's wrong. It doesn't match archaeology and doesn't match with what was going on, especially being a child of Ham. And you can see down at the bottom right corner, you can see what they call the Levant, which is basically the Middle East, the same areas that Israel, as you see kind of underlined there in the middle under Lebanon. You can see that these were where Israel was, and some of these included the cities of Israel. So all these people were of these colors that's shown. All right, let's go and continue with the story. Joshua, let's go down now to chapter 6. We're going to skip over a couple of chapters and get to chapter 6 from chapter 2. And in verse 15, it says, then on the seventh day, which is very interesting since that is a Shabbat, they rose early at the dawning of the day and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. Only on the day they marched around the city 7 times. At the 7th time, when the priests blew the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, shout, for Yahuwah has given you the city. The city shall be under the ban. It and all that is in it belongs to Yahuwah. Only Rahab, the harlot, and all who are with her in the house shall live, because she hid the messengers whom we sent. But as for you, only keep yourselves from the things under the ban, so that you do not covet them, and take some of the things under the ban, and make the camp of Israel curse and bring trouble on it. But all the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron are holy to Yahuwah. They shall go into the treasury of Yahuwah. So the people shouted, and the priests blew the trumpets. And when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted with a great shout, and the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight ahead, and they took the city, which is very interesting because um, we can see that because of her act, Rahab's act, her whole household lived. But it's also very interesting because Joshua earlier in the story was told to give 7 trumpets of ram horns to the 7 priests, and that was early in this chapter around verse 4, who blew 7 times to prepare for war as Israel went to take over the promised land. And people don't really understand how important this story is because it's very similar to how Yahusha, the Messiah, was symbolized as a lamb with 7 horns, which was given to the 7 angels, which blew 7 times as he comes down with his wrath to make war on the earth in Revelations. Right? Revelation 8, you can see, I think it's 8:2, you can see how, those 7 horns, was very symbolic. How this is kind of foreshadowing of the war to come when he's coming to make war upon the earth and those inhabitants that don't receive him, don't receive the mark of his on their foreheads, his mark, not the mark of the beast, but those that receive the mark of the beast, how he will be going to battle against them. So let's go back to the story, and it says in chapter 6 verse 21, they utterly destroyed everything in the city, both man and women, young and old, and ox and sheep and donkey, with the edge of the sword. So people, it's very important how we need to wake up as Israel, and people need to wake up to salvation, not just being the people, but also receiving him in your life and claiming him as your master and savior, Yahusha, that is. Because even in this story, you can see how Rahab saved her whole family due to her faith, and because of their obedience to Rahab, her family stayed inside, and they also were saved. They also was covered. So we need to make sure that we cover our family by telling them and warning them of what's to come, so they also will be covered by the blood of Yahusha and be ready to be redeemed in the time of his coming. So just want to bring, because that even talks about even children were killed. So how important it is to cover our children, as in with this story. But in Joshua, going back to the reading, Joshua 6:22, Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the land, "Go into the harlot's house and bring the woman and all she has out of there, as you have sworn to her." So the young men who were spies went in and brought out Rahab, and her father, and her mother, and her brothers, and all she had. They also brought out all her relatives and placed them outside the camp of Israel, showing you right there that she brought her whole family, and they didn't stay in Jericho after it was destroyed. They were actually brought out of Jericho, and they actually dwelt with Israel outside of the camp, showing how Yah will continue to have people with them, even though they might not be of the fold of Israel. But when you read verse 24, it says they burned the city with fire and all that was in it. Only the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of Yahuwah. And you can easily see right here, there's some archaeology, and it shows the city of Jericho. This guy named Bryant G. Wood. If you look him up, you can find out his discovery of the city of Jericho and how the walls came tumbling down, and he's showing you proof of how the walls fell in, just like the story says. Shows you the pottery and the walls and other stuff there as well. And it's very interesting because they try to disprove this by some aging of pottery. And later on, someone else came by and showed that the person didn't know what they were talking about, and that the pottery actually fit the day and the time of the actual events in the Bible. So it's just amazing to see how not only you don't even just have to have faith in your understanding, but there's actually physical, tangible archaeology that you can go and see and reference to show that we were a people and our heritage continues to still live on today. Going back to the story in Joshua 6:25, however, Rahab the harlot and her father's household and all she had, Joshua spared, and she has lived in the midst of Israel to this day. For she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. So it just shows you how she lived within Israel all the way up until this day this was written, even after. So it's very important to understand that she was living among them, and even her family lived on the outside of the camp along with Israel. Um, so when we get to Joshua 6:26, it says, Then Joshua made them take an oath at that time, saying, Curse before Yahuwah is the man who rises up and builds this city Jericho. With the loss of his firstborn he shall lay his foundation, and with the loss of his youngest son he shall set up its gates. And this actually did occur in 1 Kings 6:34. It tells you what happened during that time. If you go back and look, a guy named Hiel the Bethelite, he rebuilt Jericho, and just like it says, it even talks about how it fulfilled the word of Yahuwah, which was spoke by Joshua in 1 Kings 16 and 34. So that's very interesting to see how his word actually comes true. But then in Joshua 6:27 says, So Yahuwah was with Joshua, and his fame was in all the land. So why is all this important when it comes to the lineage of Yahusha, the Messiah? It's very important because you can actually see, number one, that different groups of people outside of Israel actually dwelt with Israel. And also, you'll start seeing something about the Messiah as well. So Rahab, number one, let's talk about her. In Hebrews, she's actually mentioned, Hebrews 11, verses 1 through 3, and really in verse 31, we talk about the faith. Now verse 1 says, Now faith is assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. This is New American Standard Bible. For by it the men of old gained approval. By faith we understand that the worlds were prepared by the word of Yah, so that what is seen was not made out of things which are visible. But in verse 31 we say, By faith Rahab the harlot did not perish along with those who were disobedient, after she had welcomed the spies in peace. So it just shows you how her faith actually helped save her. And then even another New Testament scripture talks about her in James chapter 2, starting in verse 18. It says, But someone may well say, You have faith, and I have works. Show me your faith without the works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that Yah is one, you do well. The demons also believe and shudder. But are you willing to recognize, you foolish fellow, that faith without works is useless? And then we skip down to verse 25. It says, In the same way was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? For just as the body without the spirit is dead, so also faith without works is dead. So it just shows how Rahab was spared because of her faith, and it just shows you how we need to also act in faith, not just repeat words, because it says that that our lips might be with them, but our hearts are far away. But with our actions, we need to also justify the faith and walk in it. So when we talk about the genealogy of the Messiah, it becomes even more important. Um, when we just read through it, this is Matthew 1 talking about Yahusha ancestry. And it says in verse 1, the record of the genealogy of Yahusha HaMashiach, or Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. And Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar, which we taught in part 1. Right? So that's a Canaanite woman there that had 2 sons by Judah. And when Perez was the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Abinadab, and Abinadab was the father of Nahshon, and Nahshon the father of Salmon. So we see Salmon's lineage there comes from Tamar. So it's a good chance that he's black. At least have some kind of look of a black look coming from Tamar there, a Canaanite lady. So he marries who? Salmon was the father of Boaz by Rahab. So Salmon married Rahab, the prostitute, the Canaanite lady, the black woman that comes from Ham, Africa. That she actually marries Salmon, who also has a black Canaanite great grandma. So Boaz was the father of Obed and Ruth by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse. That's going to be very interesting as we get to part 3. But, it just basically shows you that Rahab is actually married into the family of Yahusha and is Yahusha's great mini great grandma. So with that said, we know that Ham is Africa, right? As we said before, Ham is the father of Canaan. And what happened is that Ham mixed with Shem, right? With Judah. So, it makes sense. This is what the ancient Israelites look like. They have woolly hair, like we nowadays say that Africans have, or Hamites have, or people of Africa descent. And you see right there, you see dreadlocks. You see their woolly beards. You see even on the left, you can see even some of the depictions there of the, short dreads that some of the people that we know may also have. And all this, if you look up ancient Israelite artifacts, you will see these pictures. And this is what they call the Israelites. So it shows their Negroid features, even though they come from Shem, the Afro-Asiatic people. So, Rahab, let's just do a summary. We know that Rahab was the black Hamite, Canaanite, African great ancestor of her son Boaz, which later on we'll see leads to David and also Yahusha. She lived in Canaan in the city of Jericho. Canaan was the son of Ham, and his land is where Joshua took over, turning it to the land of Israel. So we have Canaanites, Israelites living among Canaanites because they couldn't drive them all out, as we know if we continue to read the story of Joshua. So we see how important it is to understand who Rahab is, and know that she actually came out of Canaan, where Joshua took over, and also how she married into the family there. So with that said, let's just go over from last week. Judah only had 2 Hamitic, African, black, Canaanite baby mamas, which would make the tribe of Judah what color? Black. So daughter of Shua was his wife, who he had children by, and Tamar was his daughter-in-law, who he also had children by. And that's the only only 2 women that he had babies by, 2 Canaanite black women. All right. So let's go down the line some more. So one of the Hamitic black Canaanite mothers of the tribe of Judah, Tamar, her great grandson, Salmon, married a black Canaanite wife named Rahab. So that would make the tribe of Judah what? Even blacker. Yes, they would be even more Canaanite, Hamite looking, even though they are sons of Shem, descendants of the sons of Shem, of the sons of Judah. So we know they were Israelites, but they had some Canaanite black looking features there. So it's very important to know that. Because what would be the color of the Messiah who is from the tribe of Judah? There's our clue again. Even though we don't believe in graven images, but we know he would be a black man with a white beard and white woolly hair. Good depiction of a man that looks like that, right? Not saying that that's what the Messiah looks like, because we know that he probably wasn't an attractive looking man at all. He wasn't attractive, but we know that, he had some of those features. So if the tribe of Judah was black, then where are these black Jews or Judah or Judeans now? The majority of them that's left should be black, right? So if we look in Isaiah 11:12, it says, "And he will lift up a standard for the nations and assemble the banished ones of Israel, and will gather the dispersed of who? Of Judah from the four corners of the earth." And here's a article that was very good that B'nai Israel kind of point this out in a lot of his videos, but he actually gives you the place to find it. And it says right there, King John II in 1492 expelled all the Jews of the island of St. Thomas, which had been discovered in 1471, and to other Portuguese settlements on the continent of Africa. And from these banished Jews, the black Portuguese, as they are called, let's say that again. And from these banished Jews, the black Portuguese, as they are called, and the Jews of Lalongo, which is in Congo, who are despised even by the very Negroes, are descendant. So saying that the Negroes also descend from the same lineage, right? So the Negroes were probably Israelites as well. That these Jews also descended. So if you know anything about the lost 10 tribes, which they call them lost, they're not lost. They're actually in Africa as well, based upon the Jewish Talmud and other things that actually are easily to see even in scripture in Isaiah 11:12, and Zephaniah 3:10. We also see in Genesis 15:13 through 14, and he said unto Abram, "Know of certain that your seed will be in a strange land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they serve will I judge, and afterwards shall they come out with great substance." So let's look at the marker, U.S. marker here. It says first Africans in Virginia. The first documented Africans in Virginia arrived here in August 1619 on the White Lion, an English privateer based in the Netherlands. Colonel, officials traded food for these 20 and odd Africans who had been captured from a Portuguese slave ship. A Portuguese slave ship. Didn't we say they were the black Portuguese Jews? Among all present-day Hampton's earliest African residents were Anthony and Isabella. Their son William was the first child of African ancestry known to have been born in Virginia. Many of the earliest Africans were held as slaves, but some eventually became free. So basically it shows you in 1619, we're in 2020 now, so last year would have been 2019, that would have been 400 years, and this would be a completion of the 400 years. And also some people think it was 1620 when they actually landed, based upon the difference of calendar. Not sure, But it's very interesting that a lot of the craziness of locusts and blood rivers and trumpets coming from the sky and all the crazy earthquakes and asteroids falling and COVID-19 and black people, feeling finally getting sympathy from a lot of Americans and all around the world. And, there's this prophecy. Just saying, some people just think it's coincidental, but I'm thinking, that's a lot of coincidence there. It's very interesting when you see there, you see the top. What is that image of a man standing on top of each other? That's a very interesting image there. But, especially when it says first Africans in Virginia. But I'm just going to leave it at that because there's very similar icons that's out there that looks like that. But that's not my focus, trying to keep it short. So, who are the people? Yeah, I think he's pointing at you. If you are what they call an African American, that's probably you. As they call you black. Well, what do they call black people before they call them black? They call them Negro. And that is a what? Spanish or Portuguese word for black. So why are we called the black Portuguese word Negro instead of the English word black that the British people spoke? Just shows you also some connection there. Well, I thank you for being part of part two. And there is so much more evidence that we will prove as part of part three. Only if, I said this the first time, so only if, you show that, respond or share or, get this information out just so we'll know that it's actually being used. I'm not doing this for my own self. I'm not doing this for likes or anything, but that at least lets me know that people are listening and that people really think that this information is useful for their own understanding and their own studying, as well as their own connection to Israel and their connection back to Yahusha. And even if you're not part of Israel, if you're not what they call African American, hopefully you still understand the relevance of this and why it's so important for you to know, because you could be treating the Israelites that's basically prophesied about what's going to happen in the last days, that you're treating them wrong, and you need to repent as well. All right, because he said to love your neighbor as yourself. So with that said, shalom, and may he bless you.